Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. This is episode 103 of the Davidson Hang Podcast. I'm excited to introduce to you Colin Yang, who is a commercial account executive at Box. And yeah, it's always nice to connect with another fellow Asian dude who's in account executive roles. Like honestly, there's not that many of us. So when I do come across one, I feel like we have a lot to talk about, a lot to connect about. But excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited to talk about this and all everything encompassing it being Asian in sales.
Yeah, I feel like you were sharing with me earlier like how you grew up because I do think one of the most common things that most Asian guys deal with is just confidence, right? Going whether it's like dealing with adversity or I've had a lot of microaggressions or quite frankly even just racist comments, right? Like microaggressions is putting it nicely, I would say growing up. And honestly, like it kind of did mess me up a bit, but I think like as I grew older, I kind of like became much more and comfortable in my own skin. But I like, I would love to hear like how you grew up and how that shaped you to who you are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was actually born in Hong Kong in 1996, and then we moved to California when I was 3 years old in the Bay Area in Marin. And I think my upbringing was actually unique just because I was one of the only 100% Chinese people in my town. And all the other Chinese people were the Asian mother, white father type dynamic. And, growing up, I wouldn't even say it was microaggressions. It was just straight out racism to my face, like calling me the C word and, making comments like, oh, where's my pencil? Or like all, all those stupid Chinese jokes or Asian jokes. But, growing up like that definitely, gave me a thick skin. And I think that's why I'm so confident now that I'm at this age and I really don't have a problem telling you how I feel to your face, whether it be
Mm.
good, bad, neutral. But yeah, no, definitely growing up in a town where I was one of the only Chinese people definitely was an interesting upbringing, especially, let alone, just being around girls or having friends that were not Asian. You know, I always, yeah, talking to girls are like, oh, we don't like you because you're Asian, or like, we don't know any Asian people.
Wow.
So that, yeah, so really growing up kind of gave me the lack of confidence. I always just assumed that I couldn't talk to any people that weren't Asian and they would just not like me because of like the color of my skin, which I know now is not true. Um, but definitely growing up in the town that I did and being one of the only Asians was an interesting experience. And going to school, I went down to school down at Santa Clara University, and I distinctly remember the first week of college. I called my mother because I was not used to being around that many Asian people. I was like overwhelmed by the amount of Asian people I was around. So that was definitely an interesting experience. But at the same time, during welcome weekend, I felt much more comfortable just approaching a random group of Asians, opposed to going up to a bunch of fratty white guys who were drinking beers and slamming those. So definitely it was interesting transition going from growing up in an all white town to going down to do a school in San Jose where there's a much larger Asian population. So I'm definitely glad that I was able to experience that.
I'm curious. I mean, this is like pretty deep topic, but I'm curious like if it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that like, oh, they won't date like an Asian guy, or is it like I'm curious like how much of it's like internal, like just self-conscious, or is it like both, right? Like what comes first, right? I feel like that's like a
I think now that I'm older, it's more just self-conscious because when I was younger, I just time and time again, girls were like, "Oh, you're Chinese, so I'm not really into you," like just because there's not many of you guys around. So hearing that over and over and over again growing up, from elementary school all the way to high school, definitely had a negative effect on my confidence, let alone just forget about talking to girls in general, but just with life. But definitely going down to college kind of stopped really caring what other people think of me, and then just meeting as many people as possible, chatting up, just striking conversations with people definitely helped break that down. I'm not going to lie, it's still something that I wouldn't say I'm challenged with, but in the back of my mind, it's definitely one of the first things I think about when I approach someone.
That's interesting because I think like the perception that you give off is like extremely confident, right? So someone who doesn't necessarily know you, I think just might assume that like, oh, this guy probably walks in like he owns the place, right? Like I think, I mean, obviously we've only met like a handful of like, but it's just I feel like that's just the vibe that, when you like just without getting to know you, right? That you kind of like perceive, like you kind of project.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that I try to do just because it makes me stand out and it makes people remember me, especially in sales. Half of it's confidence. 50% of the time, they don't know if you're telling the truth or not. So if you're confident and you sound like you know what you're doing, and as long as you walk the walk and you talk the talk, it a lot of the time it works out for the better. And not just in my professional life, but in my personal life, I've noticed that to be true. So I really try to come in with a certain level of confidence with anything I do.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think it's sort of like the fake it till you make it, right? Thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean, especially, I wouldn't say fake it. Yeah. No. Long story short. Yeah. No. Kind of fake it till you make it kind of mentality. Obviously, stay in school and everything, but and do your and do your work. But I would say half of it is making sure that you're confident enough in what you're talking about. Definitely. So yeah, no, I like that. Fake it till you make it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, I know we've had a discussion about this, but I don't think a lot of like Asian parents or know that like what an account executive is, right? In tech sales. At least I don't know how it is in the California, in the Bay Area, but at least
Mhm.
like where I grew up in, Jersey and stuff like that, like none of my family like members, like no one knows what it is. They're like, what do you do? Like, nah, I don't really should you sell computers? Like
Yeah, so actually, I actually didn't even know anything about tech sales until I went into college. So I came in freshman year, not knowing what I wanted. I knew I wanted to be in business just because my father was in business. He was in finance, so initially I wanted to follow suit. Go the whole finance route, be one of those guys. After further evaluation of what that actually meant, I realized that wasn't a fit for me. I'm not a I don't like sitting at a desk for 12 hours a day of looking at graphs and making models and all of that type of shit. So
Yeah.
I realized that finance wasn't the role for me. So I needed to look into the other departments of business because I definitely knew I wanted to be in business. So that's how kind of sales kind of got brought onto my radar. And there's not really sales majors at colleges, so I went with the marketing role. I thought that it was the closest related department to sales, and I didn't want to bust my ass doing economics or finance if I knew at the end of the day I was going to go into tech sales. So that was my thought process at school. Extremely happy. That's what I did. I wouldn't say I coasted by, but I was able to get a really good understanding of how businesses operate from a marketing standpoint by doing that. And then going into tech sales, it really gave me a good understanding of how to work well with my internal teams, whether it be marketing, legal, procurement, et cetera, to, at the end of the day, get those deals across the line. So definitely glad that I went with the marketing route.
Yeah. Like it's interesting, right? Because I'm surprised not more colleges have some sort of professional sales degree, right? Because we obviously both know how much you can make being, like you're a relatively young guy, right? In the sense of like your whole career, like you have a lot of years left of working and you're making, money that people in their 30s, 40s, and people that are well established in the career is making, right? So you would think that there'd be like a degree in professional sales, but it's still very hard to come by.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point actually, because I forget what statistic it is, but I do know that I was a large amount of people in their professional careers end up in sales. And if you think
Yeah.
about it, I wouldn't say everything is sales. Obviously, coding is coding and finance is finance, but a lot of these roles that aren't titled as sales are sales. So let's say
Yeah.
you're in finance looking for clients to manage their portfolios. You're cold calling, that's sales. You're not technically selling software or a physical product, but you're selling your services. So I absolutely agree with you that I think schools should start investing more in sales careers because I don't know about you, but a large number of my friends, a large number of my peers from school are now in business development or account executive roles or SDR roles at different software companies. And especially being in the Silicon Valley, there's just endless amounts of opportunity, working for these guys. And a lot of the time, um, going into like an SDR position is a very good segue into moving horizontally into different departments if sales at the end of the day is not for you.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. I think universities and colleges across the US should start investing more in the sales role, especially within technology. Obviously, I'm quite biased around that, but I personally believe, technology is the future. There's no way we're going back in time. So if anything,
Yeah.
there's more and more of these tech companies that start popping up, and more of these sales opportunities are going to be available for not only us, but hopefully other Asian Americans and Asians trying to look into getting into sales.
Yeah. And I just think it's fascinating that, like 20 something year olds are making like over 150, right? Like I think the concept is just like, I think if more Asian parents knew about that, they wouldn't be so opposed to their parent, like their kids, like, taking a BDR job, right? Because they're like, wait, why would why would you go to college and get into sales? Like that's like a weird concept for many Asian parents.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is sales for them when they were working and sales now are two totally different things. I believe like when they were around our age working, it's door to door, sleazy, got people just trying to take as much money out of your pocket as possible, opposed to now we're working for these, technology companies that are actually making direct impacts in communities and individuals
Yeah.
as well as other companies' lives. As well as now there's more of a career path for sales. It's very broad, it's very structured. And I think as long as, depending obviously on your relationship with your parents and what they are trying to push you into do in your career, if you're able to break out the framework of what being in sales and technology is like and letting them know, hey, there's a very structured promotion path and I can make X, Y, and Z amount of dollars, doing this job. I think it usually is a little bit easier to tell your parents, I want to go into this. I have a plan, these are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year goals. And eventually
Yeah.
I want, after being in an individual contributor role, I want to go into management, and that'll lead me to being a CRO at a software company like Rich. So I think as long as you guys have a plan and you're able to communicate that to your parents, whether they will accept it or not, I think it would make them a little bit more comfortable with your decision if at the end of the day you want to get into sales.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think you're right. I think there is a career path in sales, and like you said, even if you choose to get into customer success, there's that, or sales engineering or technical, implementation. There's like a lot of different paths, and to your point, it is all relatively new, right? Like customer success, even 15 years ago, was not really like
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. So
yeah.
no, absolutely. There's just with, especially with the COVID and the acceleration of technology adoption and digital transformation among essentially every single industry,
Yeah.
I think there's so much opportunity for people to make a boatload of money, in my opinion. So I'm definitely along for the ride.
Yeah, and I saw that you've worked at, Okta, which is also a pretty fast-growing company, up-and-coming company, similar to Box. What's your framework in evaluating different opportunities? Because I do think in the Bay Area, there's just so much to choose from. So how does one even know where to start?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for me, when I'm evaluating different companies that I want to potentially work for, I think about three different things. Number one, do I enjoy the people that I'd be working with? Number two, am I still growing and learning in this role? And then number three, am I making money? Um, at the end of the day, there's so many technology companies and so many different opportunities where you could almost just throw a dart at a board and whatever it lands on, you can go after. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is at the end of the day, work-life balance, as well as identifying the people that you will be working with, either with colleagues or your managers, and making sure that you have good relationships with them, is the most important thing. Because whether you like to hear it or not, there's a lot of internal politics in tech, and a lot of the time, if you are doing your job, hitting your number, that's not enough. You need to make sure you have the relationships built out with your managers, with your directors, with the managers who you would be reporting to next with your promotion. So I think, to answer your question, when you're evaluating different software companies, definitely look at Glassdoor reviews, what the bottom line employees have to say about the company and whether they're enjoying it or not. I like to do a little bit extra work, and I like to reach out to existing employees in the current role that I am interviewing for, and I like just to pick their brain. I like to ask them, no bullshit, beat around the bush. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Why don't you like it? Why do you like it? And then I weigh my pros and cons and decide whether I'd like to take a chance on that company or not.
Yeah, that's good advice. People, I think a lot of most people's concerns, I think politics is something that traditionally like a lot of Asians aren't good at, right? At least that's like what
Mm,
I get when I speak with other
yeah.
Asians. And it's something that we can either hate it or we can get better at it and then use it like and leverage it instead of make it something that like, oh, like I'm just not good at it, right? I think we need to have
Mm,
a growth mindset around, well, our new generation, like maybe we could be the ones that can actually be good at it and also mentor and teach others who, maybe haven't been traditionally good at it.
yeah. I think I should have said this earlier before, but I think 50% of your 50% of your job is making sure your resume is good and your GPA is up to standard and all of that. But the other 50% is networking. At the end of the day, networking, especially in technology, is what's going to get you far in life. Like, for instance, my internship that I got at Okta, I got that because my mother was doing yoga with the chief of staff, and she had her over for lunch because they were doing yoga a bunch. And I introduced myself. I was confident. I asked her, I was curious, asked her questions about her role and what she did. I had no idea what Okta was at the time. I was just
Okay.
like, I was a junior in college. I was looking for internships. And I was just like, hey, like, is it possible that Okta has an internship? And while it wasn't direct networking, it was networking. And until this day, I'm still very connected to this woman, and she has put me in contact with a number of fantastic people. So I think, especially within Asian Americans or Asians in general, they just need to be confident enough to be the first one to make a move, say hello, be
Mm.
curious, ask questions. Um, I'm a big proponent of asking questions. My motto is, the worst they can say is no,
Yeah.
and if they say no, then on to the next. But it's better to get a no rather than not asking and potentially getting a yes. So I think networking is definitely the one of the honestly the most important thing in this technology and sales role. Obviously, hitting your quota is very important, but I think the relationships that you make at your company with your manager and with your other employees is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think so many of us Asians focus more on the results and oh, if I
Mm-hmm.
outwork everyone, I'll get promoted, right? But like you said, that's only 50% of it. The other 50% is getting visibility, advocating for yourself, like having champions, having people that will have your back, right? Whenever there is opportunity, they're throwing your name in the hat for projects or taking on additional responsibilities. And ultimately, that's equally as important. I think traditionally many Asians are just focused on, well, just keep your head down. If you do good work, like you'll just be successful, right? But in this new world that we live in, it's like, well, that's like the bare minimum, right? And then
Yeah.
because everyone's so competitive now, like you really have to stand out from the competition. And that does, like you said, take putting yourself out there and sometimes having uncomfortable conversations where you normally wouldn't be, whether it's their title or you think that, oh, they're too busy for me or something like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons why I'm very comfortable doing it is at school, I rushed a fraternity, and I pretty much think of interviewing other companies as rushing another fraternity. You have to put on the fake smile. You have to sound super excited and happy-go-lucky, and kind of, fake it till you make it. But I definitely consider that helping me and kind of breaking down my confidence in approaching other people, whether that be random or not. Always just think of it as, or personally for me, I think of it as rushing a fraternity. I know not everyone has that ability, but it's got to put on that fake smile. You got to ask questions, and you gotta want to learn. Definitely.
And what advice would you give to people who are thinking about rushing a fraternity, but they're not sure, like even after you graduate, like what benefits it has? Like, would you be able to reflect and kind of share? I mean, you
Yeah,
did say that's important, but anything else?
yeah. At the end of the day, it's networking. I have 150 guys spread all throughout the United States. Most of them are in Silicon Valley, but I have 150 guys that, whether I know them or not personally, I am affiliated with them through this fraternity, and 9 times out of 10, they're more than happy to talk to me. So when I was in college, I actually was a part of the project where we built the Salesforce database of all of our past alumni that used to be part of the fraternity, kind of where they're at now, and as well as their LinkedIn, their contact information. And a lot of these guys, they're now COOs and CEOs, or like VPs or directors at a lot of these big software companies. So again, it all comes down to networking. I mean, obviously there's some people who think fraternities are dumb and all of that, which is totally fine. They're allowed to their own opinion. But the reason I did it was solely, obviously I wanted to like meet a group of guys and kind of have that sense, but it was a long-term strategy through networking. And actually, I got my first ever internship. It was at this small startup called Sports Board. Well, I guess a little backstory is I had an internship lined up. It fell through because the office closed, and it was like a month before summer. So I was, shit out of luck. I was like, all right, well, I guess I don't have an internship. After that, I sent out a few feeler texts in my fraternity. One of the boys in my fraternity, his father had a tech startup, and he hired me with like 2 weeks later. So,
Wow.
it's networking. As if you don't like it, learn to like it, because it's very, very important, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, so many takeaways. Yeah, I would agree. So I joined an Asian fraternity, and I'm still involved with like I came back to speak at the general interest meeting at Rutgers the other day. So yeah, it's awesome. And then there's people that these are a meeting with Russias. So I was like, hey, like why should you join a fraternity? It's like, well, I graduated this amount of years ago and I still come back and I still help out these guys because like I want to give back, and like they've given so much for me when I was in your shoes, right? So I want to give back. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I do think networking, I feel like traditionally, like a lot of, like for instance, what I saw was like Koreans would help Koreans, like, or Indians would help Indians, like Vietnamese would help Vietnamese, right? But I don't know, like I feel like nowadays we're coming together more. Like there's more of a cohesive like identity, where I think it used to be like, well, Taiwanese people or people from Hong Kong only hang out with people from Hong Kong, right? But I do see
Yeah.
us meshing a lot more in this year or the last year or so.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Especially, with, all the extra bullshit going on with COVID and, other things in the political sphere. Absolutely. I think definitely as an Asian community, we're coming together a lot more, rather than kind of just looking at individual races and whatnot, because, um, you know, definitely, Asians are still a minority group, and although we might not be seen as one, we definitely are. So I think it's good that we're connecting more and having these conversations and just bringing them more to light.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate your contributions. I mean, you're clearly, it's interesting because I feel like you're intentional with your like you think long term, right? Which I think is smart in general. Um, but yeah, I mean, you're clearly very like mature for your age. Do you have like a lot of mentors? Like, I guess, I mean, I'm sure the fraternity helped, but like, would you say you go out of your way to find mentors, like more than, let's say, the average person?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would say I'm very lucky in the sense that my father was in business, and so he's very business savvy and he knows what he's talking about. So I think growing up, he kind of put that backbone in me and kind of gave me the mindset of, think long term, don't think 1 2 years immediate results. Think of what will my actions and what will my decisions do 4 5 10 years down the road. But I absolutely also reach out. I also have mentors as well, because obviously my father is my father and he has, very set criteria in his mind of, what I should be doing with my life.
Uh-huh.
And, he's not right all the time. Your parents
Mm.
can be wrong. You need to do what's best for yourself. So I think it's good. And I personally also have a number of different mentors in different spaces, because I think it's
Mm.
good to have different insights into a lot of these things. So I
Mm.
definitely encourage you to reach out to mentors. And 9 times out of 10, no one's going to get mad at you for asking you to mentor them. Like, if anything, they're going to take it as a compliment. Like, I've never
Okay.
asked someone for help and they're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, fuck off. Like, never had that happen. They're always, especially in the technology space, open arms. They're more than happy to share what their experience is and what they've learned, to
Mhm.
make sure, yeah, because at the end of the day, there's no point in recreating the wheel. I like to say,
Mhm.
if other people are successful, I can be successful, copy what they're doing, add a little bit of my own personal spice into it, and that's how I like to think about it. So I definitely encourage people to take advantage of mentors, ask around, reach out. The worst they can say is no, and if they say no, go on to the next person.
Yeah, I like, I mean, I feel like you definitely get after it, right? Like you like even at a young age, would you say that like was it like just a muscle that you built that you just because it sounds like you do pretty well with rejection. Was that always the case or was that just like a learned skill?
Yeah, no, I think it it was something I acquired growing up. I was not always good with rejection. So it's not like I'm Superman or anything. But again, kind of growing up in an all white neighborhood and constantly being made fun of and constantly just having shit said to my face really built me up. And by the time I was in high school, I was
Mhm.
definitely not taking any type of stuff from anyone. So um, I'm a big proponent of, be nice. You don't know what people are going through, and I think definitely those experiences have kind of shaped me to who I am. So definitely, I would say I like to get after it. I also am a believer of, do not rely on anyone else. If you want something, go out and get it. Um, that's how I've been successful. Obviously, you have friends and family that you can rely on, but if you have a goal in mind and you're serious about it, put in the work and it will happen. It depends. It just depends how bad you want it at the end of the day, how much effort you want to put into it. I think individuals are very strong and powerful. And if, again, as cheesy as it sounds, if you put your mind to it, you can get it done.
I think so. I would say, the pandemic right now, some people are struggling with it, right? Whether it's like socially, it's a bit weird, or just, you're not, it's just a lot of change for a lot of folks. What advice would you give to people who, maybe like prior to the pandemic, they were doing well, but they seem to be struggling, and because of that, they maybe lost some of that morale.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think why whenever I'm feeling down or whenever I'm feeling lonely or like just not feeling it, I like to put things in perspective. At the end of the day, I'm healthy. and I have a job. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the first thought process is, putting things in perspective, taking a step back and really, looking at my situation and, and, and understanding that. Um, Again, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't have jobs at the moment, whether that be because they are in different industries or whatnot. But I think what really has helped me, especially through the pandemic, is putting things in perspective and talking about it
Mm.
as well, not just bottling up my feelings and not talking about it. I think definitely expressing how you feel and letting people know that I'm feeling shitty because of X, Y, Z, or I'm not feeling work because of A, B, and C. It helps. I'm a big proponent of talking about your feelings and not bottling things up, because at the end of the day, your mind is your worst enemy. And if you don't believe, I mean, I hate this, sounds so cheesy, but if you're not believing yourself, like, you're not going to make it. Like, so I think that's the number
Yeah.
one thing is be vocal and put your life in perspective.
Yes, so many gems. I feel like a lot of the takeaways from our conversation is like, obviously all that stuff happened like when you were younger sucked, right? Like clearly no one wants to be made fun of. No one wants to be rejected by the opposite sex all the time. But it really kind of, I'm present to if that didn't happen, like it wouldn't have made you have such like thick skin and resilience. And if that didn't happen, it wouldn't have truly made you who you are, right? Which is someone who like just gets after it, who isn't afraid of hearing no, who isn't, because I do think like a lot of times like you can let that really affect you, and then you're like, okay, I'm not gonna like ever talk to women again. Or you can move on and move forward and be able to learn, right? Which clearly like you were able to take what most people would say it's like a pretty crappy situation and make it into something that is made you a better person, right? I think it's like what you choose to do with that adversity.
Yeah, no, I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say a lot of this was handed to me. I had to work for it, whether that be networking or reaching out to employers or employees and just kind of getting my foot in the door, whether that be through reaching out to my mom's yoga friends or just direct messaging them. I definitely think you definitely need to put in the work if you want to see if you want to see results. Things will not be handed to you. So especially being an Asian in this type of environment, things will not be handed to you. So you need to make
Hmm.
yourself stand out. You need to volunteer for projects. You need to take on extra responsibilities. You need to let your company know that you're here to stay and that you want to put in the work to get shit done.
Yeah, and it is an interesting topic too, right? I speak with a lot of other Asians in client facing roles, and we often share the sentiment that we do feel like we have to work a little bit harder than, let's just say our like white counterparts. And maybe that's just the nature of thousands of years of systematic, like just how corporate works. So it's hard to really like, it's going to take time, right? Like it's not going to be like tomorrow where like, okay, but it's an interesting topic that not a lot of people talk about, whether it's just people are afraid of just saying controversial things, but it's something that many people aren't open to sharing out in the open, you know.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think a lot of the time, it's not talked about. And I think, definitely it's good that more and more people are becoming more aware of the situation, whether that be because people like you and I are bringing it up and talking about it more. But I mean, it takes time. Like I've been at Box for 2 years. It's not like I got at Box and was instantly well known, was instantly doing well. I had to, make a name for myself and do the types of things that we've been talking about over this last hour. And it definitely takes time. Like you said, it's not instant gratification. You just have to be patient as well.
Yeah, well, thanks, Colin. I really appreciate all of your insights, many takeaways in terms of like taking initiative, right? Not waiting around for opportunities to be thrown to you, not waiting for life, like being proactive and intentional about your life and your career choices, not letting someone else dictate, where what your future holds. Also heard a lot of good takeaways around like networking and really just doubling down on that and making sure that yes, like get the results, but also prioritize networking because ultimately that is really going to help you out, whether you're in the Bay Area or not. Like networking,
Yeah,
because I feel like we're getting
it's the
more
name of the
global.
game.
Yeah,
Yep. The more people you know, the more opportunities you'll have, is what I
yeah.
like to say.
So yeah, man. Well, thanks. Want to acknowledge you for just being open to talking about some of these things that not everyone is quite open is very open about. It can be personal, and also, you just being open to just sharing like what's worked for you, and I'm sure many other people will listen to this, take action. What would you say is some advice for someone who they think they may be good in sales, but they're not like 100% sure if they want to do that for a living?
My advice to them is try it. At the end of the day, if you don't like it or it's not cut out for you, do it for a year. You find out you don't like it. You've learned a lot about yourself. You've learned, number one, sales is not the career for you. And number two, that you're looking at some other roles. So, I mean, anyone who's hesitant on joining sales, I always encourage them to do it. Again, experiment. You don't even have to do it for a year. You can do it for 6 months, end up deciding you hate it, but at least you know that you put yourself out there, you took initiative, you tried something that you were not most comfortable with. And, at the end of the day, you're learning more about yourself as an individual, both in your personal and professional life. So I think my advice is whatever you're thinking about doing, whether it be joining sales, whether it be moving across the country, whether it be, asking that girl or guy out, just do it. Again, the worst they can say is no.
Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you, Colin. And yeah, I do think not a lot of people make the correlation that there's so many skills that you get from sales that are just transferable across like every
It's
aspect of
crazy.
life.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy. A lot of sales is because a lot of it is emotional intelligence as well. You have to, depending on the situation, depending on the person you're talking to, um, you really have to feel it out. And, I guarantee you sales is a very good way of learning that and getting as many up to bats as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I think this was a very enlightful conversation. Appreciate you making the time. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, I'll link to your LinkedIn profile. And yeah,
Of
best of
course.
luck with everything.
Yeah, you too. And I appreciate the opportunity, man. Thank you.